young guys are so confused about whether or not they have any worth in the world. But when I hear about people putting in their mouths, hanging themselves, like my friend Johnny Fair, or drug overdoses, it's like, this is preventable. It is preventable at the level of, sure, government institutions, but like I'm saying, like, I'm putting the call out now, like, I think we got to like crew up and take care of each other because time's going by.
It's good to hear you say that. Where do you think that this movement's coming from, this need?
Oh. Yeah, one thing I'm increasingly concerned about, because it's the experience I know, I'm concerned about mental health for everybody, frankly, but I'm very concerned about the suicide rates and depression rates of young men in the United States and elsewhere. But we have a serious, serious crisis of identity that people are starting to talk about. But even the mere mention of it, it sounds like, oh no, they're all going to rally together and do bad things. No, these young guys are so confused about whether or not they have any worth in the world or how to express their generative drive in positive ways. I think most of it starts with lack of, I'm just going to say it, of a strong, in the right sense of the word, paternal figure. But actually, if I may, I brought this, I've been reading this book that was suggested to me by another team guy. What is it with you guys? That is a really, it's somewhat of a controversial book, but if I could, the book is called Iron John. Have you read that book by Robert Bly? Very powerful book about boys and men's relationships to themselves. And it's a little outdated on certain dimensions, but having grown up in a, home where my dad lived separately and this whole thing, I think, it really struck a chord with me. But, there's one passage, can I just read it? It's a very brief
Absolutely.
quote. So Bly said, and I don't know if he's saying it for himself or if he's quoting someone else, but he said, the whole of the remote father leaves a gap in the boy's life that demons can enter through. And that just hit me like square everywhere. And I was like, that's right. Like for every bad thing that's come to me, through me, out of me that I regret, that I wish I had done differently, the challenges that I wish I had chosen differently, I'm not blaming my dad. That's not what this is about. But I think that we are in a point now in the evolution of this country. I do believe it's an evolution, not a devolution. I'm an optimist, where we don't know who to look to. There's a lack of either an internal or an external paternal model that helps us discern between really not good road, so not good road, okay road, pretty good, and best road. That we learn that in part through trial and error, but we also learn that in part by being told what to do at key moments. And I look out on the landscape of podcasts, right? You, Joe, Lex, Jocko. I look at figures like Goggins, Andy Stumpf, right? There seem to be a lot of team guys in the mix, but there are others too, right? Chad Wright, Rich Roll, right? Jay Shetty. I don't want to like paint this picture that it's just one kind of archetype, right? And what I see is a lot of, certainly female audience. Mine is certainly very, very much 50-50. But I hear from these young guys, and even guys my own age or older, like we've sort of drifted away from this idea that there's a standard kind of set of protocols, dare I say, to follow to get yourself through the wickets to becoming a solid person inside and out. And there's no excuse making, right? But if I look at the mental health crisis among men in this country and women, but look, here we're focusing on men, I think that we've had, even in homes where fathers were there, sometimes they were absent because of substance abuse. I think sometimes they were absent because they were absent. And I think sometimes they were there and are really terrific fathers. And I got friends like this who were amazing dads, amazing kids, to boys and girls who are now. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I am very grateful for my experiences, and I'm very grateful to have shored things up with my dad. And I think that whatever mistakes I've made, I own as my own. That's part of being a grown man. But I do believe that quote. I think when we're young, when we're 5, 10, 15 years old, 20 years old, if there isn't somebody there to like set us straight, or that we haven't internalized the message of what's the right thing to do, that we drift. And that to me is where the higher power piece and relationship to God and looking to and asking for guidance there can sometimes support that as well. Because I mean, I'm not trying to turn this into a sermon. This is just my experience. And we need something outside ourselves that we can look to when we're troubled to help steer us right. And that can be brotherhood and family and friends, but we need more men supporting other men on how to be a good man. And not just looking to the examples of how they've succeeded in business or this and that. Actually, a friend of mine who I consider very, very wise, a woman who's a mother, she said, it's kind of weird. You look at all the toys in a toy store, she has a son, and the like boxes of all these toys nowadays are like this warrior walking out from all this destruction behind him. Like he won and he's alone. And I go, really? She goes, yeah, go look. So I was like, all right, I'll go look. And I looked up some, and it's true. There isn't a picture of like being in community or being with family, or we've created this model of like this like lone wolf and triumph thing.
Interesting.
That I think she's onto something. I don't think it's the full picture. But I have to say, what you have, marriage, kids, thriving business, you got your history in the teams and history of CIA, you're transmuting any pain that you have, as far as I can tell, into goodness for the world. Like, thank you. I mean, you're playing a fatherly role to millions of people. And I do believe that whether or not it's intentional or inadvertent, I think that's what a lot of the podcast community and inventors like Elon and, Zuck did his version of it. Here I'm talking about men, and yeah, I know there are women that do this too. I get that. From Silicon Valley, I get it. They do amazing work too, but here we're talking about examples of men for other men and boys. And I think this lone warrior thing I don't think it's gonna work. And I'm just lucky that the brotherhood I was in included enough healthy people to help pull me through. I mean, there's no need to get into it, but that Jim Thiebaud guy pulled me out multiple times on other things later, helped me. He didn't pull me out, he held me accountable. Rick Rubin held me accountable, sometimes through tough love, sometimes just through like good old friendship and love of that kind. But I'm very lucky. I have these people in my life, and I've tried to do it for other people too. But when I